Welcome to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of compassionate living. I'm your host, Hope Bohannick, and we have a very interesting and somewhat unusual topic today. We will be discussing hypermasculinity and the connection to meat eating and the resurgence of meat eating kind of in the US that's happening right now. Our current political situation of a hard right turn has fueled a backlash on numerous justice issues and ethical progress that we have made in the last few decades, and veganism is among the targets. I think this is a really important conversation to have to see the perspective of men around this issue. Men make up only about a fourth of the population of vegans in the US. So, like 3 out of 4 vegans are women. And we kind of knew that already, but the research is showing that that gap is widening and that veganism is increasing amongst women. So, from 2008 to 2023, in 2008, there were about 4% of women were vegan. In 2023, that had increased to 9%. But in that same time period, it remained relatively flat for men. Only about 3% of men were vegan during that time. So most people that have gone vegan in the last couple of decades are women. This is concerning. I think that this is something we need to think about and address. And this conversation that you're about to hear with Jan Liband has helped me to understand this whole thing a little more. I found my empathy for men really increase after talking with Jan about this. So there was so much to unpack here, and it was so insightful. I want to just jump right in. So here we go. Okay, today we are welcoming Jan Liband to the podcast. Jan is a fact-based environmentalist, public speaker, and former Silicon Valley veteran who has been vegan since the 1980s. He has an academic background in psychology, plus decades in marketing, and has studied our shifting attitudes towards food and the growing environmental and health impacts of our global food system for decades. Jan volunteers for several vegan and environmental organizations and serves as chief researcher and speaker for Plant-Based Advocates, a Bay Area-based nonprofit, and is a board member for Compassionate Living. Welcome to the podcast, Jan.
Thank you, Hope. It's good to be here.
Good to see you. Yes, you are on our board. I wanted to mention that, and I appreciate you coming in just in the last year, a new board member. So thank you for your service.
Glad to help, all for a good cause.
All right. So we're going to get started with our first question before we get into our very interesting conversation about masculinity and meat. But first, we want to get to know you. So, why and when did you go vegan? And I know it's been a long time. You went vegan in the 80s.
Yeah, it was quite a ways back. I guess I'm now considered one of the OGs, in a way. But yeah, it was actually back in the mid 1980s. I'd just gotten out of college, and through my life, I was a big athlete, in tennis and in cycling and in a lot of things, even picked up on martial arts. And I've always considered myself kind of a healthy eater, eat a lot of vegetables and salads, but I also ate, meat and dairy like folks here in the US. But I didn't eat a lot of junk food or too many snacks. So I thought I was a pretty healthy guy and all that. And then I had some friends who happened to be vegan, and which is kind of odd back then in the mid 80s. And I got a booklet from them. And what this is a booklet. There was a very famous book that was published ultimately in 1987 called Diet for a New America by John Robbins, right? It influenced a lot of people and talked about the impact on the environment and on our health and just how the animals are really treated on farms. And I got this booklet a year before it was published. It just excerpted all the facts, all the critical statistics, from this book. And I read through this, and I was just blown away. I mean, just learning about the size and scale of our food system, how the animals were really treated, the impact on health, and it just ran counter to really kind of everything I learned and thought, growing up. It was really kind of a wake up call. And it also, I realized, oh, parts of the government like the USDA, they're not really looking out for our health. I mean, they're looking out for the health of the industry, not for the health of the citizenry. So I read this booklet and I just went, oh my gosh, and my mind was blown. I go, so much of what I thought and believed was wrong. I mean, it's not fun to be wrong. It's we like to be on the right side, like to think we're rational, good people. And when you're presented with so much information and you had some helpful friends that are living healthily, and then you're presented with this information, for me, it just changed my world. And so I made the full switch, which was very strange back in the mid '80s, especially for a big, huge athletic guy. I'm 6'6", 225, lift a lot of weights, but made the switch, right then, and then really never looked back. And I've just been watching society and everything kind of catch up in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, with today's topic, also looking at something slipping back. So this will be
Yeah.
interesting to look at.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Diet for New America. That is what did it for me too. I went
Yeah.
vegetarian and I found that book, and that's what got me to go vegan. So
Mhm.
that book changed a lot of people's lives back then.
Millions of
Amazing.
people were
Yeah.
impacted. Yeah.
Yeah. So Jan, I know that you have a wealth of information on the environmental impacts of animal agriculture and the health connection. We've talked about it because you've been in this for so long and have been researching it for so long. But you wanted to come on to talk about something that I think is really interesting and something important to talk about, and that we've never talked about on this podcast, at least not for a full episode. And that is the connection of masculinity, masculinism, and meat. And of course, you are a man. And so you have a unique perspective about this, right? So I'm really glad that you wanted to come on and talk about this kind of vibe shift. That's what you called it, a vibe shift back to meat, a resurgence of meat eating as a symbol of masculinity and meat connected to identity politics and the culture wars and everything that's happening right now. So, what social factors do you think are driving this resurgence of meat eating and its connection to hypermasculinity? What's up with this? Tell us what's going on, Jan.
Wow, yeah, we are certainly seeing a vibe shift,
Yeah.
as and note it really to this very strong sense of almost like not just masculinity or the good old patriarchy, but to like hyper masculinity, like masculinity on steroids,
Mm.
literally. And it's really a complex interplay of things going on in the socio-cultural environment, the economic environment, political environment, and obviously a lot of psychological factors work into it as well. And it's really a long time coming. But I mean, in some ways you have to go way back and look at this as being really a reaction or even a backlash to these long running cultural factors and trends that have gone on. You go all the way back to the suffrage movement, women's right to vote, and the women's rights movement, back in 60s and beyond, civil rights movement, a lot of big social changes. And what we're seeing now is a really hard swing to the right, and kind of a reestablishment and statements to reclaim our manhood, reclaim our masculinity, and all that means, which in many cases and very prominently features doubling down on meat eating.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's like a backlash against feminism. And Carol Adams, the author of the classic Sexual
Mm-hmm.
Politics of Meat, was really on point 30 years ago, or more than 30 years ago now, when she tied meat consumption and gender. There's really a connection there. The hierarchies and binaries, where we have this binary thinking where one aspect of a binary has more value, right? Masculinity more than femininity, and rational better than emotional, independence better than interdependence, even human better than animal, of course. And this binary thinking has long made men resistant to power given to women or to anything that is seen as feminine, right? Wanting to hold on to their power. Yeah, tell us more about all this.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought up Carol Adams' book. Yeah, The Sexual Politics of Meat. I mean, this was a seminal book. It changed a lot of people's thinking and perspective on things. Came out back in I think 1990, right? So,
Yeah.
ways back. Yeah, so she really called out how, meat eating, even meat production and all that is really kind of a reestablishment of the patriarchy, of the dominance of males over females, and really the devaluing of females in terms of objectifying, commodifying them, exploiting them, especially exploiting the reproductive systems and rights, females, and not just of human females, but of animals, with the breeding and husbandry and that sort of thing. And she did a really incredible job in raising awareness about that connection between how we treat and exploit animals, and particularly the female animals, and how that same objectification and exploitation carries on in patriarchal society.
Yeah. This reminds me, we lost Roe v. Wade, and people, there's so much going on. There's so much noise that things get lost, and that, I mean, is huge that we actually don't, in many states there are not abortion rights. I mean, that's it's just wow. We're
Wow.
really, yeah,
Talk about a vibe shift. This is the legal shift. This isn't just vibes.
yeah,
This is our legal system. And these were, hard fought for
yeah,
rights, right? That prior, courts saw very clearly in one direction, and now a current, Supreme Court makeup believes very differently.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so,
Wow.
yeah.
Oof, it's scary. It really is. So, meat eating now, animal products, really in general, it's not only meat, right? It's dairy, eggs as well, kind of just any domination of animals in the form of animal products is tied to this masculinism, this cowboy image. And you were even saying hypermasculinity or toxic masculinity is another kind of
Hmm.
word or way to look at it. This strong man, this might makes right, kind of like hyper individualism, right? You're not accountable to society. If you mess with me, I'm gonna shoot you. I'm gonna take matters into my own hands, right? And all that is allowing for the subjugation of women, of animals, domination of others. And meat eating is so connected to this, right? This masculinism, this white nationalism, right wing MAGA types who call people on the left soy boys, right? For like implying that replacing meat with soy or tofu makes you weak, makes your body weak, makes you weak of character, right? So there's a lot here. What is it with this kind of new? Well, it's not new, right? It's not new. It's just resurging of the strong man and connecting it with meat. And I think there's even billboards that I've seen online, that I can't remember specifics right now, but the billboards are talking about, meat eating or having your burger, and or don't let them take away your burgers, stuff like that, right?
Right, right. I mean, that's been a talking point, on the in the conservative media, on the right, that they're going to take away your burgers, we're going to make you eat bugs.
Yeah.
If you've heard that as well, and it actually it's a lot of fear mongering. Obviously, they're like, my gosh, they're going to take away some of your favorite foods, whoever the they are, which are generally, positioned or framed as the, progressives or the elites or the left. They're going to interfere with your freedoms, your choices. They're going to control you. And as humans, like, we don't want to be controlled, right? We don't want to be told what to do, and we don't
Yeah.
certainly want to be told what to eat. But you're right, you hit on some really good points. I mean, particularly here in the US, where, the whole idea of like conquering the land, westward expansion, the cowboys, the whole thing with, ranching, rugged individualism, and even us founding as a nation, right? that, we're founded on this big, strong, independent, individualistic ethos
Yeah.
that, kind of permeates our culture. And you look at the power of Westerns and Western movies and books and just the thinking of a cowboy, which is, based on the domination of really large, strong animals, but also all animal agriculture is based on the domination, control, exploitation of animals. So it's not just that it's allowed, it's like a fundamental part of the Western psychology. It's our whole psyche. It's kind of, built right in. And what you saw, for some time now, really for several decades that we mentioned earlier, talking from the suffrage movement to the women's rights, civil rights movements, and then in more recent decades, there's this greater move towards social equality, right, and more, gender fluidity that's going on. And for the last few decades, with rights, LGBTQ, plus rights and how those factor into society. And what we're seeing now in the last 10 to 15 years and 20 years is as these progressive values and social changes took effect, some people kind of really stood up and took issue with it and said, hey, look, I'm a guy. I used to be the top of the heap, right? And had all the privileges and deference and everything that a normal male would have had in the US. Those, rights and those privileges are falling away. They're
Mm,
getting taken away.
mm,
And boy, the I mean, that's how it actually felt. I mean, I'm like I said, I'm a little older guy, approaching mid 60s, got a lot of friends, and they truly feel like that. They're like, wow, society's changing in a way that I don't like,
mm.
and that's been going on for a few decades. And so for many of these people, it's felt very personal inside. It wasn't just like, oh, gee, we're going to allow certain policies take effect or things like that. A lot of people, when you hear of woke or wokeism, right? I mean, it's often framed as being excessively politically correct. And the key thing there is excessively. That
Mm.
you like it, that it went too far. And so
Yeah.
now we look at that's gone too far. I don't like this gender fluidity and who's really a man, who's really a woman. And I'm going to put a stake in the ground, put an end to this madness. By gosh, I'm going to be a man, like a Western man. I'm going to double down. I'm going to eat my meat. I'm going to eat red meat again. And I need it for my strength. I need it for my protein. And this whole reaction to what's going on the social changes, we're seeing that they're now going, oh, I'm gonna put my identity as really as a man, and a man eats meat. And my gosh,
Yeah.
all the advertising and the media, and now the whole social influencers, the whole media landscape, and the manosphere, they really serve to hype up this ideal of hyper masculinity and meat eating being really fundamental to that, being really like a symbol of dominance and strength and regaining your political power and saying, what in group are you part of? Who are you a man? Are you a wimp? Are you a soy boy? Or are you a guy?
Yeah. Well,
And boy, all the media and really play on that fear, the men have that things were slipping away, and by gosh, I got to reclaim my rights, as it were.
yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, it's frustrating because, it's not a zero-sum game. Everyone doing well, everyone having well-being, everyone having what they need to live a good life. This is going to just make it better for everyone, for white males as well. I wish that could be understood and seen. It's but then social media, I think, is really driving this narrative that you were just talking about that counters that, right? The manosphere that you were talking about, the incels and alpha males and all this stuff that is being kind of, I mean, it's such a, I think that there's so few men that were thinking like that, but because of social media now, it has been so amplified and it gets wrapped up in this worldview of, like you said, like we're losing our power, and
right.
meat eating is such a dominant symbol of that. Meat eating, it's like a dietary prescription for this MAGA mentality, right? This right wing kind of neo fascist mentality. So this is just a whole new challenge that we're up against now.
We really are. And then I think, point you're hitting on that is good here is that some people, on the right would go, oh, this thing about, a rising tide lifts all boats, and it not being a zero sum game, kind of runs counter to a lot of Western thinking.
Yeah.
Right. It's if it's my land, it's not your land. If it's, these are my animals, not your animals.
Right.
And all the sports, there's winners and there's losers. There's people who dominate and there's people that get exploited. And it's even fundamental, even in capitalism, right? Because you have capital and you have labor, right? And so
Mm,
you have two
yeah.
fundamental things. And so I like, it's you have to be a little more nuanced and a little more sophisticated in your thinking to overcome this kind of simplistic thinking of a zero sum game. And that there's, winners and losers, and that men have to be dominant or better than women. If we can, cultivate and have everyone's talents and everyone's expertise and everyone working together, that would be better. But folks on the right would dismiss that as happy talk and kumbaya, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
kind of stuff. But it's really embedded deeply in the whole Western ethos and in capitalism, the whole thing of
Yeah.
dominance and exploitation, winners, losers. It's really kind of a hard paradigm for law people to break out of. And certainly with the current political environment here in the US, starting with our current president, President Trump's his first term back in 2016, was there were several cultural factors that leading up to that, where a lot of people said, hey, I can't even stomach voting for a woman for president. That's just not right, right? It's like a rejection of the of femininity and women's rights. I'm going to vote for a guy,
Yeah.
right? And it's kind of been snowballing now for 10, 15 years as kind of a reaction to what was looked at as society getting too progressive, too permissive, too fluid. We
Mm,
want traditional roles and traditional foods and traditional culture, and there's
right.
no better sign of traditional foods and masculinity and dominance and strength than meat.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And also
steak and eggs. Ooh,
right,
yeah.
totally. And also economic factors too. I think, I mean, I think you're absolutely right that it's cultural. But also we're facing economic challenges, the rich getting richer, the wealth gap widening. Certainly in the US, we're seeing this. And I think those economic uncertainties that also pushes people into this attachment to traditional symbols, right?
You
Like
sure?
like the
Yeah,
meat and the cowboy and hypermasculinity. Because
yeah.
I know you wanted to talk about the economic challenges.
Right, because it also factors into it. We've been discussing a bit about like kind of the social, cultural, factors and rights and economic factors and changes and a lot of uncertainty in the economic environment are absolutely fueling this move towards hypermasculinity and mediating as well. And I mean, a big part of it is that, there's been changes, right? With the deindustrialization of America, a lot of jobs moving offshore, the breakdown of unions, and traditional male and as as a male as a provider for the family, and it's become more challenging to do that. Right, the jobs aren't there, or they don't pay as well against the cost of living, and so it's harder for men to be the classical traditional provider
Hmm.
to a family. And so there has been actual real economic loss. There has been that. And so when you are uncertain about things, there's comfort in familiar things. You really seek stability through tradition. If you've been displaced, or you look at your role as being under threat, and you can't provide as well as you could have, once time, you're going to often, or people do tend to retreat to familiar norms, like the meat eating, meat potatoes, the good old days. So it's a way to kind of reassert your identity as a man, to exercise some power and some control when you're in an economic environment where things are uncertain and where you feel less secure. It's a way to kind of reestablish that security, that sense of control, when you got these big economic factors that are affecting you and really everyone.
Yeah, I've always thought that really the only way for people to be able to care about animals and animal issues is if we are secure in our economic system. That if people feel that that they're comfortable with their financial situation and they can put food on the table easily, then you can start to make choices and changes, right?
Right.
Then you can be like, okay, well, maybe we can pay a little more to try some new things, or for something that's organic or a plant-based meat or dairy that may be a little more expensive or something like that, right? Unless we have that economic stability and security, I don't know that it's just harder for people to make changes in their diet. It's harder for them to find ways to explore new dietary choices if you are struggling to even have enough money for your grocery bill. So that is a challenge right there, I think. And it's getting to be more and more that way, that people are having less to spend. People are having to rely on food banks where you just don't really get a choice, or you have to take what's given. It's just harder. And so that is another challenge I think that we're going to be facing, is that as, people don't have the economic security, then they also just, you don't have the bandwidth, I don't think, emotionally, maybe, mentally, to make changes in your diet that would be better for everyone. It's a tough
It's
situation right now. Yeah.
it really is a tough situation, and meat, as we say, is a status symbol. The only the wealthier people could eat meat, or the chiefs
Mm,
of the village, or
yeah.
that sort of thing. But if we look back again in history, U.S. history, when the Great Depression hit, meat eating went way down because people couldn't afford meat. So, right, when people have more resources and they have more financial security, they can buy more they want. And meat, for many people, is considered a luxury, luxury item because of the
Well,
cost. But on the other hand, the way now is in the U.S., right, with all the government subsidies and
right.
incentives
The
and so forth,
subsidies. Yeah.
meat is the cost of meat and dairy is unnaturally cheap.
Right.
It
Yeah.
is. If you're familiar with the book Meatonomics, you look at the costs of raising animals, chickens, cows, pigs for meat. A lot of the costs are externalized on the taxpayer, and so what you pay at the grocery store, what you pay at the restaurant, is just a fraction of the cost that it would normally be. If you remove all those subsidies, a burger would be anywhere from $13 to $30,
Yeah. That's
depending on
right.
how you run the calculations. And so our economic environment and our current, system encourages overconsumption of animal products, because they're made unnaturally cheap. Whereas, plant-based foods just don't even get anywhere near the subsidies or love. In fact, Stanford ran a study. They looked at the spending, I think, from 2014 to 2020, and they looked at the meat and dairy industry received 800 times the amount of government support as any of the plant crops or plant-based meats or
Wow.
alternative protein things. 800 times. So I mean,
Wow.
the scales are not tipped in favor of fair economic choices and everything.
Yeah.
So, and for a lot of people, yeah, look, we right now we have had inflation for a while. We have calling the affordability crisis. People hard time keeping up. Well, fast food and subsidized foods are available everywhere, and so we live in this kind of toxic subsidized food environment, which encourages meat eating
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's made so cheap. So, I mean, that's one of the ways we could address this issue is, redirect those government funds. But that's a discussion for a different podcast. So,
And a huge task for
yeah, a
someone. And I'm
huge
grateful
task.
people are working on that. But yeah,
Yeah.
a toxic, subsidized
Food environment.
food
Yeah.
environment. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Well put. It's so true. Well, I want to switch just for time. I mean, I feel like there's just so much we could keep going with this. But just for the time factor, I want to switch to another aspect of this. I mean, it's still on this subject, and that's about the nutrition myths, the new dietary guidelines, bringing back the emphasis on meat and dairy. I talked about this in a recent podcast, the new upside down pyramid that put red meat and dairy at the top and has that as, the recommendation. So it's just another interesting aspect of this resurgence of meat that goes beyond even the nutrition and guidelines to the political, where it's connected to nutrition myths and alternative facts, and meat is healthy and makes you healthy. right? That's now
Hmm.
becoming more popular. So tell us about this. I know that you're a big guy. You mentioned at the beginning,
Hmm.
and have been in the fitness world and have done some, I think, biking or remind us of what maybe, but how is this all connected?
Right, right. So the thing obviously that's really coming to the fore, and that the both the meat and dairy industry as well as all the social media influencers that make up the manosphere, as we're calling it, which is this kind of hyper masculine group of podcasters and YouTubers like Joe Rogan and Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson and the Liver King. Do you remember that guy?
Oh my gosh.
Now disgraced, but but this like putting this meat as strength, kind of narrative is really gotten to be front and center, and it's really being fed by the nutrition misinformation and confusion that's out there. Now there's always a little grain of truth even in all sort of misinformation. Like, does meat have a lot of protein? Yes, it does. Is protein good for building muscles? Yeah, it's good. And for your immune system and everything. Yeah, it's good. Okay. Is it the best way to get your protein? Is it really a healthy source of protein? Well, that's a different question than
Yeah.
whether does it have a lot of protein. The thing is, we are raised. I grew up in the 60s and 70s. It's like, it was pounded into us through the media. Back then it was TV, pre-internet. But now since the internet and now with social media and everything else, right? This whole idea that you need meat for strength, you need meat for protein. You need meat because it's complete protein. I mean, there's these, which is a myth, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. I mean, all foods have all all nine essential amino acids and the 11 remainder. All foods, they just have it in different ratios and different quantities.
Yeah.
That's there. But that complete protein myth just won't die. But I continue to see it. I saw it in my LinkedIn feed just yesterday. Again.
Oh.
So it keeps coming out. So what the meat industry does here, I mean, is they're running a playbook, not unlike what the tobacco industry, and they're trying to feed what you already want to believe, right? We have confirmation bias, right? We like to read good news about our bad habits, right? We want to read things that make us feel good about the decisions we already make and the food choices we already make. So, our mentally, it's also called motivated reasoning, right? Where we'll actually seek out information that supports our values and choices, and we'll actively discount or dismiss or ignore information that runs counter
Mm.
to what we want to believe, right? We want to avoid a lot of cognitive dissonance. So we want clarity. And again, here's this time right now where there's uncertain social changes, there's uncertain things going on in the economic environment, political environment, all these things culturally. And then this health narratives, well, guys aren't so much into dieting or to lose weight so much. I mean, some of that is if they're overweight and they're trying to do it. And you did have the Atkins diet. Do you remember that back in the
Oh yeah.
90s, right? Which,
That's still
heavy
alive.
meat,
I
low carb, basically a low
yeah.
carb diet.
Rob Lowe is doing commercials for them recently. It's
Oh
just
my goodness.
yeah,
Still
awful.
okay. So, yeah. So what we're seeing is that the meat and dairy industries, as well as the current politicians in the political environment and this manosphere, the social media influencers, all re-embracing meat, doubling down on meat as you need it for protein, you complete protein, you need all these things. And it's really then fueling people's look. If I'm already kind of I want to have a reaction. I don't like what's going on in the world. There's a lot of uncertainty. I'm going to double down on what's known. And meat is good, based on what they want to believe, right? Right now, you can find an expert, quote unquote, an expert, or a scientist or a doctor, who will support anything you want to believe. just yeah,
Yeah.
just searching on the internet, you can find someone that'll support that. So there's kind of like a resistance to healthy diets, because the healthy diet, for the last 20 years, meat kind of got, a little bit bad name, right? Starting in the early aughts, we started to realize the scientific evidence was weighing in since the 70s, 80s, and beyond that, oh, shoot, meat and dairy and eggs, these are high in saturated fat. These are high in cholesterol. They lack fiber. They have a lot of other bad things in them. Whereas, diets that are rich in fresh fruits and vegetables and whole grains provide a healthier environment and better for your gut and better for your health. But people like react to that going, well, I don't like that. This whole thing of eating less meat, that's part of the progressive left wing message. That's some environmental thing I don't really believe in. And so I'm going to double down on healthy meat, unprocessed foods, like meat's less processed, right? Than these other things, and which is a whole thing we could go into with the meat industry, starting a whole campaign against the plant meats. But um,
Right, right.
there. So as long as there's enough confusion in the market, as long as you can get enough scientists and industry funded science or industry funded studies to support health claims that traditional people, particularly males, want to believe about eating meat and dairy and other animal products, they're going to believe it,
Yeah.
and they're going to use that as further justification that I'm doing the right thing and this is what I need to be strong, and they are going to actively discount and dismiss decades and decades of the growing body evidence that overconsuming those products leads to chronic diseases of many types that's
Yeah.
killing Americans in record numbers,
Yeah.
versus a healthier diet.
Yeah.
Right. So as long as there's
Yeah.
confusion out there, people will retreat to what's familiar, and they'll follow the people and the scientists that feed their current biases.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, and you mentioned the plant-based meats and plant-based cheeses and this new narrative of eat real food. Or I mentioned this in the podcast where I talked about the
Right.
new dietary guidelines, that now this narrative of unprocessed and real food is, I think, definitely a reflection or a dig on the plant-based meats and cheeses
Right.
that they're saying are unnatural. Natural or unnatural, we need to look at the science of what foods are actually going to be healthier or not. And anytime you compare plants, in any form really, and meat, plants are going to come out on top. But this end the war on saturated fat, that's this other phrase, right? That the MAHA movement,
Mm-hmm.
the Make America Healthy Again movement is using, end the war on saturated fat. I mean, it's just a dog whistle to right-wing masculinism, that legitimates this might makes right nationalism, worldview of dominating animals, dominating women. I mean, it seems so innocuous. It seems so like, oh, we just think saturated fat is not so bad, but there's so much more tied into that. It's red meat. It's meat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems so kind of soft, but it's not. It is legitimating this narrative of oppression. Really interesting. So we've had, the game changers and so many influential documentaries about the benefits of plant-based diets, not only on health, but on athletes and athletic performance and like the science behind it. And so I think that this resurgence of the meat as strength and meat as masculinity narrative, right, is kind of a backlash to all that, and to hopefully, I'm going to say hopefully, a dying industry of meat. I think that's another aspect of this, is that we have had some influence, and the meat industry is concerned about their longevity, right? So they love all this, and it counters the science with cultural tropes, right? Cultural
Right.
staples.
Right.
This "you can only be strong if you eat a lot of meat" narrative, right? So how is that influencing the views about sustainability and health?
Yeah, so it factors into it quite a bit. Even caring about the environment, or being an environmentalist, is often viewed as a progressive cause, like
Yeah.
as if that was a political thing, right? Like
Right.
somehow environmentalism or caring about having clean water or clean air is somehow framed as progressive or left wing or
Oh,
woke or
God.
something. I mean, wait a second, we're talking our environment here. We all love it.
Right.
I mean,
We all need to
we,
breathe. We
we
all
all
need to
need to
drink
breathe
water.
it. Right, right. It's interesting because I mean, even amongst traditional conservatives, Republicans, decades ago, there was like a conservation ethos, in there. Like they want to protected their hunting grounds, or at least not have their waterways fouled, so their favorite fishing hole, wasn't messed up. But at least there was some idea of like protecting the land, protecting the
Yeah.
environment. It wasn't
Yeah.
all just extract and exploit, full steam ahead. But somehow environmentalism and even thoughts and views around climate change more recently have all got lumped into, oh, these are just some left wing progressive kind of things, and this whole thing that, meat and animal agriculture is wrecking the environment. Oh, that's just left-wing BS.
Mm.
And yeah, so with the whole kind of meat as strength narrative, which is, so dominant, in our culture, and it's what we're raised to believe, from a very young age, and with all the media amplifying it and reinforcing it, it does make it harder to have, conversations or even think about, well, could reducing meat or cutting meat out of the diet or animal products out of it, could that really still be good for my health? I mean, aren't I going to be weaker? Or for me, it was strange. Here I was back in the '80s. I was a big athlete. I was playing tennis. I was a big cyclist. NCAA tennis and cycling. I was getting into martial arts. Big guy and all that. And I'm going, gosh, if I don't have meat or I don't have dairy, aren't I going to be weaker? Don't I need it for protein? And it's like everyone kind of has that in the back of your mind. In fact, even John Robbins in that book, The Diet for a New America, came out again in 1987. He's got a great chapter called The Rise and Fall of the Protein Empire. And he has this very funny part in there where he mentions, it goes, even though I'm already cut out animal products, I'm vegan, and I know there's protein in all the foods and I'm eating a balanced diet. He goes, there's some little monkey sitting on my shoulder going, you're not getting enough protein. It just, and we all kind of think that. We kind of fear that. And here I am. I know the science. I've been studying this stuff for 40 years. I've been watching nutritional studies come out again and again and again that, you can get, everything you need on a good, well-balanced, whole foods, plant-based diet, vegan diet. But there's this little voice that just kind of goes, oh, if you feel a little tired one day or something like that, or oh gee, it's probably because you're not eating enough meat. So
Wow.
because we were taught this before we could even really think, it's just
Yeah.
as little kids, it becomes unquestioned. So when you try to share facts or figures or stories about the health advantages of reducing your meat intake, going full plant-based diet, I mean, they just don't listen. Well, they don't
Mm.
want to believe it. They don't understand it. And that happens also with policymakers as well. But, they're getting flooded with lobbying money from the meat and dairy industry. I mean, they're the largest lobbyists in Capitol Hill outside of Big Pharma.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
you got politicians getting funded to support certain policies. You have people that just want to believe certain things and want to double down in these uncertain times, and with health messaging and sustainability thinking that confirms their current choices,
Yeah.
and being a man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's that's interesting that you say that, you said that there's this voice in your head that's like, oh, maybe I need meat. You're still unsure about it, even though consciously we know the
Mhm.
science, we know that it's better, but still there's this little voice in your head. I've never had that actually. I've
Good for
ne
you. Good
I've
for
never
you.
had that. But I'm wondering if that's because I'm a woman, and perhaps it's harder for men because
I
they've had that,
mhm.
connection with your strength and your muscles and all of that. So maybe it's even harder for men to get rid of that voice.
Oh, absolutely. I think for all men, I think of younger guys I speak with, the 20s somethings, 30 somethings. I go to the gym 3 to 4 times a week. I'm hanging out with the gym bros. I guess I am a gym bro in a way, but also my, friends in my age group, as well. It's just been pounded into us since before we could even think that meat is strength, meat is dominance, meat is protein is
Mm,
muscles. Muscles means strength, and that's what you need to be attractive. That's what you need to be a man.
wow.
So when a man hears, "Oh, you should, reduce meat, or meat's bad for you," there's a part of you that just goes, "What? You want me to be weaker? You want me to be a wimp?
Mm,
You want me to have, less muscles? Be less dominant?" It's like what, And so
wow.
before I decided to make vegan choices, make that not my lifestyle, if someone came up to me in my early 20s, right, and I'm a big athlete and all that, and said, "Hey, you should go vegan," I would have said, "Hey, you should go away." You
Yeah.
should shut up, or
Yeah.
whatever. Not that I was that mean, but in the background, it's like, what are you talking about? It just seemed so strange, to think that you could get, healthy, good diet, get all the protein, everything else you need just by eating whole plant foods. It just
Mm,
ran counter to everything we taught, even
yeah.
pre-pyramid days.
Well,
We want to believe that what we're doing now is best for our health, is going to lead to the things, and it is harder for men because we're encouraged in this culture to be strong, to be providers, to not show vulnerability. And we like to hang with our buddies. We want to have an in group, want to, go play some sports and go have a pizza, go have some burgers after,
Barbecue.
some have barbecue, all the manly stuff, grilling, and you
Yeah.
go, oh, I'm gonna have a salad, guys. And they're like, you wimp,
Mm.
this,
Oh,
So
wow.
yeah, so
Yeah.
there's an aspect of a huge aspect where we might hold up a health argument or something like that to go, oh, I need it for this. But what you're really saying is, I don't want to be out with my buddies. I don't want to be
Mm.
out with my families. I don't want to, I don't want to create waves. My identity is a man, and I'm a good man, and I'm a strong man, and meat is part of that. It's like
Wow.
integral part of that, and it's just reinforced everywhere. So coming
Yeah.
out of health arguments and environmental arguments, as powerful they are, you're just running straight into this like identity and culture and tradition sort of thing that people can't even really question, because they were
Yeah.
taught it at such a young age. They haven't even, in many cases, thought about it that much. So
Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that gives me kind of a new sympathy or empathy for men that want to be vegan and that are transitioning to vegan. I never really thought about that actually, that it could be much harder for men socially.
it is right.
Yeah.
You're literally being asked, hey, why don't you be less of a man?
Uh,
When
wow.
everything in our culture for the most part
Yeah.
say you should be more of a man, and be
Right.
good there. So I mean, I am talking about some very classical gender stereotypes, but they're so dominant. And as we're talking about today, they've just been amplified. They've been turned up to 11.
Right,
you
right.
know,
Yeah.
now
Well,
these days where it's not enough to just not be fat or be a little fit. Now you have to look like a male model, right? With all the crazy
yeah.
muscles and definition. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's crazy. When I go to the gym, I see these kids, mostly in their 20s and some in their 30s. I didn't see this 10 years ago, but now I see them with their phones standing in front of the mirrors, taking all these photos of themselves to share out on Instagram or wherever,
Oh, wow.
and to
Yeah.
monitor their progress and do posts. And
Mhm.
it's like, and then they have these impossibly fit role models on social media. So in the same
Ah.
way that was for women, right, to be impossibly thin or have
Mhm.
certain figures and physiques that maybe you're just biologically, physiologically not capable of having. Men, particularly younger men, are being held, now their role models are these impossibly fit, impossibly muscular people that would take hours and hours at the gym to get to.
So much pressure.
So much pressure, so much pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
wow. Interesting. Very interesting perspective. Yeah. Another thought that comes to mind, and this is kind of getting to the broader picture, kind of getting out of the health and diet aspect, but still connected, and that is around violence. And I've been thinking a lot about nonviolence. I think about that a lot, very often, nonviolence, but I've been thinking about violence and the connection to what's happening in the world with right now with Trump and ICE and all of this. And, to kill an animal is a violent act, right? It so ties into violence and domination. You either need to hold an animal against her will and kill her in farming, or go out and kill an animal in the wild. But either way, to do this, you have to kind of shut down or shut out your empathy, right? I mean, it really, at its core, animal eating,
Mm-hmm.
animal killing is connected to violence. And men maybe are drawn to that violence, or perhaps
Oh
not
boy,
wanting not
yeah.
not wanting to control that violent tendency or something. I don't know. I mean,
Oh, oh, you're hitting, yeah.
I don't,
You're hitting on the big point. Yeah.
I don't want to stereotype and think that men are the only ones that want to do violence. But there's some connection there. Meat eating kind of legitimating violence.
It does. I mean, it's an expression of violence because this animal had to be killed.
Yeah.
However you slaughter an animal, that's a violent act. That's an animal that did not want to die.
Yeah.
It'd rather
Yeah.
be with friends and family. So
Yeah.
if you're also familiar, there's another, very, I guess, popular, very, book, well done book called Why We Love Dogs, Eat Pigs, and Wear Cows
Of
by
course, Melanie Joy.
Melanie Joy. Yeah, it came out
Yeah.
in 2010. She pointed out this whole thing around carnism, right?
Yeah.
This whole invisible belief system that permeates society that, gets us to think of certain animals as pets and certain animals as food or farm animals and certain animals as wildlife. And it's pretty arbitrary and it's different in every culture and everything. But when you think of animals as food through this belief system and carnism, you think, they don't really have feelings and they're just objectified. And, so like killing of them, it lessens your connection to the animals. And in our culture, right, we don't celebrate empathy. In fact, there's quite a bit of things in the press and in the media the last 2 years about how empathy has fallen out of favor.
Oh, wow.
And when it comes to ritualized meat eating and slaughter of animals, it's like it's hard to ramp up the empathy meter. In fact, we're told to toughen up.
Mm,
Again here from the male viewpoint, right? Hey, don't be a softie. You got to
yeah.
toughen up. It's just kind of drilled into you as part of being a man. In our
Yeah.
culture, and I mean part of the reason that if you look at in vegans, only less than a quarter of the people that are vegan are male. Women who are encouraged in a lot more ways to show compassion and to show empathy and to care and nurse others and bring life into the world, all this more naturally gravitate towards having empathy, having compassion, thinking about the other. Whereas men in a capitalistic society, in a Western society, are told to dominate the other, to exploit the other, to be the winner,
Yeah.
right? Everything, is favoring the dialing down of empathy, the dialing down of compassion, the dialing down of care, and to win and be a man.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of big forces at work, and then the violence right now is actually being celebrated. And in the culture, in this whole manosphere kind of culture, like in the old days, we just had sports, okay, and there was boxing as amongst the sports. Well, now we have, starting back in the '90s, we have something called the UFC, the
Oh,
Ultimate
yeah.
Fighting Championship. And I'm not sure
Yeah.
if you're familiar with it, right? They have mixed martial artists using all kinds of techniques in the ring just to beat the crap out of each other and
Yeah.
get the other guy to submit. Get that?
Yeah.
Submit. At the end, they can
Yeah.
tap out and submit. And and the UFC now, I mean, heck, our current president wants to have like UFC fights. He goes to UFC fights like, oh, and I am man. I love this level of violence, right?
Mm,
I
mm-hmm.
celebrate it, and we see it with our current immigration enforcement, in the streets, celebrating violence and dominance and overwhelming firepower.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's not like it's just there. Again, it's being turned up to 11 as an expression of power, as an expression of that. And meat eating and the new dietary guidelines, which, the inverted pyramid that celebrate meat, are just full blown expressions of that
Wow.
dominance and that violence, and even celebrating it, relishing it,
Yeah. Wow.
in it, which, yeah, to a lot of women, just is like, oh, why do that? But to a lot of guys, they it's bloodlust, right? It's
Mm,
just, I'm going to celebrate it. It's going to make me tougher. It's going to make me stronger. I'm going to prove what group I belong to. Yeah, I like this stuff. It's weird. I kind of walk this strange line, right? Where I go, hey, I've been vegan for 40 years now, but I'm a huge guy who loves martial arts, but I love NFL, love my local team, the 49ers, like
yeah.
craft beer. I'm a
Mhm.
dude. I'm a guy, right? And
Yeah.
I can talk like a guy and do like a guy stuff. But I also care about other people, and I care about our environment, and I care about all our fellow creatures, in the world. Trying to get other guys to wake up their empathy and to become more compassionate and to that sort of thing. Yeah, it's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
You're
Well,
fighting some strong psychological factors and some long-term psychological programming.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we definitely need more men like you. That,
Some would
that
disagree, but yeah.
well, no, I mean that, because you can hang with the guys and do guy things and
Right.
all of that, but also be an example of empathy and of compassion
Yeah.
and being vegan. I love that. You mentioned UFC, and Kojin and I, my husband Kojin, we've seen commercials for that, like on TV,
Hmm.
and he gets very upset about that because he's a martial artist. He did karate for years. He taught karate
Hmm.
to children.
As did I. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
many years.
and
Yeah.
but he says this is another level now. It's just this, it's just so violent and so horrible. It's not about defense and a beautiful art anymore. Now it's just beating the crap out of each other. And
It really is. And there's blood everywhere, in the
ah,
ring. And the
yeah,
guys are, I mean,
yeah,
boxing looks so tame now by comparison. I see a boxing match
yeah,
and I go, oh, they're just hitting. And they have padded gloves. Oh my gosh, this is like a
yeah.
pillow fight,
Oh, wow.
Seriously, by comparison, if for those of you
Terrible.
who haven't seen UFC, yeah, you could check it out on YouTube
Yeah,
and turn
yeah.
it off right again.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah, and you see it in movies too. Movies are getting movies, TV, our media is getting so much more violent as
mhm.
well. Wow, I mean, there's a lot going on here
Yeah, we
with
celebrate, and
all
it's a big
this.
part of the whole manosphere. I mean, some of these manosphere guys are UFC participants. There's this guy named Jake Paul, right, who gets into
Huh?
boxing matches and other forms of fighting. These other guys were former kickboxing champions. I mean, they're hyper masculine, but that's
Yeah.
that's one of the reasons, in a way, that the first Game Changers came out. I think what 2018. That documentary was so
Hmm.
powerful is that the protagonist, the main guy narrating it and his story, right? I mean, he won the UFC competition,
Oh,
on the
wow.
Ultimate Fighting Championship show. He was the winner of that season show.
Huh.
And then he went on to teaching, mixed martial arts and combat techniques to the military and to secret services and all these things. I mean, he is literally a badass. And so they picked, this was very intentional. I mean, they picked a guy who's unquestionably masculine and
Mm.
strong and could take you down, right? As an example, someone who did their research. He got injured. He injured his knees. He started doing a ton of research on, well, how do I recover? How do I get back in the ring? How do I do this? And he started discovering, oh shoot, the gladiators were mostly vegetarian, and you go way back, and all the sports science showed that you need certain foods encourage recovery. And it was like, oh my gosh, I've always thought, meat was the way to strengthen this and that. That's just marketing.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
That's just marketing
yeah.
and myths and misinformation and
Right.
right. So it was quite a discovery for him. If anyone hasn't out there hasn't seen that one, do try to see it. It's available on a few streaming platforms. So
Right. The game changers.
Game
Yeah.
Changers, yeah,
Yeah. I might I'll put a link to it in the show
yeah.
notes. Yeah.
There's another one coming out. There is a Game Changers 2 is coming out
Oh,
soon.
cool.
And big focus this time is not so much just on sports performance and recovery and strength, but this time they're going to go on the angle of the environmental
Oh, okay.
angle and look at ranchers that have changed their ways and caring for the environment and doing the right thing and it is really in all our interests.
Yeah.
I think it'll be real eye opening for a lot of people.
Nice. We will look for that for sure. Well, Jan, this has all been so enlightening, really amazing to talk to a man, really, who's been thinking about these things. I mean, Kojin and I talk about it as well, and and I just appreciate men that are vegan. I really do. I love you guys.
Great.
Thank you for being vegan as a man.
Thank you. Yeah. Well, I appreciate women that are vegan too, and everyone else in between. It's a good thing.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, we do need to wrap up. It's been an incredible discussion. I'm so glad I had you on to talk about it. But I'm going to ask you our last question. What gives you hope for the future?
Ooh, good question. Yeah, right now, I mean, there are reasons that I do feel somewhat, hopeful about the future. I mean, obviously I'm gonna say, I mean, things do seem fairly dark right now, and
Yeah, it's
I
a
would say
tough
very,
it's
very, yeah, very clearly moving in the wrong direction on many fronts. I mean, I am hopeful about some things, and it's in rather than just sit there. If you heard the expression, it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness,
mm,
right? So
yeah,
I'd rather be a candle,
yeah.
in this whole thing. And so, I mean, what kind of gives me hope, even though we're going backwards on a lot of our rights and a lot of things that are going on, but you need to remember is take a longer view. Things change, people change. And you remember that, even if you're not happy with current trends, I'm not happy with a lot of current trends. You got to remember that, fads do come and go. Current trends that are, hyping up this super masculine, hyper masculine, violent ideal and doubling down on meat, particularly red meat. This is not going to go on forever. Political regimes will change, new voices will emerge, more studies, more documentaries will come out. The amount of evidence that it's out coming out and the awareness that, is coming out that, wow, plant-based eating, it can be really good for you and you can prevent and reverse the diseases. And then the harms of the other stuff, despite all the manosphere, is also getting more well known. So, because when I first went vegan, 40 some odd years ago, there was still a lot of questions. Could you even do well on that? And
Yeah.
the answers are clear now. So that's getting out there, and then the awareness also about back then, the awareness of the environmental impact of our food systems and our overconsumption habits, not just with meat, but with everything, was a little less known, less well appreciated. But people are coming to be more aware of that as well, even though there is currently a backlash against it. And also the truth is really coming out with, I mean, the documentaries, the footage, we know how animals are actually treated on animal farms now, and or how things are processed in slaughterhouse. That used to all be hidden, and the truth is now available to people. So, in a way, I mean, what gives me hope for the future is, yes, it's dark now. Things are going the wrong direction, but things change, and they do change. And there's this growing awareness of the health benefits. There's growing awareness of the urgency of the environmental impact and our need to change course with our consumption patterns. And I really think that, maybe there's going to be a backlash to the current backlash. Honestly, and this is what I'm hoping for, and
Yeah.
I'm part of it. But literally, there could be, a backlash where we go, okay, we just went way too far on the masculine side and the doubling down in this and the other, and losing rights and civil rights and so forth. Let's take things back into a more equitable and sustainable direction. Like we
Yeah.
really don't have a choice on the environmental side. I mean, people can say whatever they want about their health, but the health of our living systems and our ecosystems that sustain us, what we're doing now is just not sustainable. And as people become aware of that, there might really be a grand spiritual awakening or realization that comes over people, and we go, hey, we could really be working together on a world where everyone does better
Mm.
about things. And so, again, yeah, I feel pretty bad about a lot of things now, but there is hope because things do change. People can change. New information can come out. And I'm just hoping for that backlash to the backlash.
Yeah. I
I'm
love
work,
that.
I'm working to
Yeah.
fuel it.
Yeah, I like that backlash to the backlash. And
Yeah.
that, just that it is a backlash, this
Mm-hmm.
whole meat and masculinity thing,
Right.
and the whole political
Yeah, and
situation.
it's a trend. It's a fad.
Well, but just that it is a backlash is hopeful, I think,
Mm-hmm.
because the full decades and decades and decades of trajectory has been positive, really. I mean, that's the reason there's a backlash,
Right. Right.
because we've had so much progress
Yes.
in a good direction, right? So it's true. Let's hope this is just a bump in the road, and that strong trajectory of compassion and equality and feminism and all of that will continue. And
Right.
I believe that it will.
Right. Let's just hope it was just a big bump in the road and look
Yep.
at that in the rearview mirror.
A big orange bump. Yep.
Big orange bump.
Uh,
Oh boy.
all right.
Okay.
Well,
Yeah.
Jan, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I had a lot of fun talking to you, and thank you also for being on the Compassionate Living board. We really appreciate your presence, and thanks for all you're doing for animals.
Hey, thank you very much, Hope. I really enjoy working with you and everything you're doing at Compassionate Living, that we're all doing to try to bring a better world about.
Thank you for listening to the Hope for the Animals podcast, a project of Compassionate Living. So, this topic that we just discussed, I think that some animal advocates would say, well, this is why we shouldn't be political. This is why we shouldn't say it's a social justice issue. This is why we should only talk about the animals, right? And try to appeal to everyone. Well, I disagree for numerous reasons. And I think that First of all, this would happen anyway. As we pointed out in this discussion, these associations run deep in our culture and really go beyond politics. So I think that these stereotypes would exist no matter how we presented it. But also, and more importantly, we shouldn't ignore the violence done to humans. And I think that by not including veganism in the social justice conversation, by focusing on the animals only, we are doing that. We are ignoring the violence to humans, to the planet, by not showing these connections and how it's all connected. It's bypassing all the human rights abuses when you don't include vegan in with all oppressions as a social justice issue. We do care. I know so many of my vegan friends who go to the ICE protests, support anti war issues, even work for human rights issues. We do care about the rights of everyone. So we don't want to ignore that and separate it. On a recent Ezra Klein podcast, I can't remember who the guest was, but he said, and I'm going to quote him, the left is about values and morals and equality and doing the right thing. We get distracted with details and policies, but that is what the left should be talking about more, because at the base and at the heart of the Democratic Party is decency, morality, and I would add compassion and kindness. So we can try to appeal to the right and conservatives all we want. But at the end of the day, this is a justice issue, and we have to keep pushing for justice for the animals, for humans, for trans rights, for immigrants, for everyone. And ultimately, compassion, equality, fairness, eco justice, anti oppression, it all becomes so overwhelmingly fundamental that everyone supports it, everyone practices it. And vegan is not an exception, but an extension of the fight for social justice. If you enjoyed this podcast and found this conversation meaningful, please share it with others. And don't be afraid to embrace your emotional, compassionate side and live vegan.